people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. It's Fight Week. It's Fight Week for former champion Sky Nicholson, who will look to put further distance between herself and that loss to Tiaria Brown on the undercard of Wiley versus Dib this weekend at the Fortitude Music Hall in Brisbane, Australia. A return home for the former champion, scheduled for 10 rounds in the super bantamweight division. She will be taking on India's own Urvashi Singh. 30 years old to Sky Nicholson, who is 29, an orthodox fighter to Sky, who is a southpaw for what is an IBF Intercontinental title. Would seem that young Sky is going the IBF route, sporting a professional record of 13 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 2 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 14 professional bouts. To Urvashi, who sports a professional record of 12 wins with 3 losses, no draws, 7 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 15 professional bouts. A similar number of fights to Sky Nicholson, but not on the same level. Urvashi's quality of competition is a lot more pedestrian than what you see on Sky's resume. Last in action in September of last year, opposite the ring, Samwang Sawing Chai, who Urvashi stopped in 3 rounds in a contest scheduled for 6. Currently, Urvashi is on a 4-fight winning streak, having last lost to Casey Croft. In September of 2021, Urvashi has fought 4 times since then and won 4 times since then. Over to Sky, who will be going into her 3rd fight this calendar year. Her first was the fight with Tiaria Brown that she lost back in March. Her rebound fight against Carla Gonzalez in July. Fight that Sky Nicholson won by way of knockout in the 2nd round in a contest scheduled for 8. Currently ranked at number 3 via the IBF. 2 girls ahead of her, former champion Sigolene Lafarve of La France and unbeaten up-and-comer Micaiah Krebs, who I've often talked about here on this channel, a dark horse in the super bantamweight division. Micaiah Krebs is ranked at number 1. So if Sky Nicholson wins this weekend, and I think that she's going to, she will climb up those ranks, but it looks a lot like she's gonna have to get through Micaiah in order to land that number 1 spot and become the IBF's mandatory challenger. The IBF champion, Ellie Scottney, is just 1 belt away from becoming this division's undisputed champion. If and when that happens, you have to wonder if she will stick around long enough for Sky to challenge her. This is a deeper division than the featherweight division. That may be lost on the casual observer. Just looking at the IBF's ranked standings, you have an unbeaten up-and-comer in Micaiah Krebs that would be a threat to Sky Nicholson, a former champion in Sigolene Lafarve, and another one in Mexico's own Eric Cruz. Very talented fighter in Lara Grizab, unbeaten, and Tycee Gallagher.
Delicious.
It's what I'm often telling you guys, that in women's boxing, the lower you go, the deeper the talent pool becomes. Now, 126 is pretty deep all on its own, but 122 is even deeper. Sky's not ranked with the other alphabet organizations. I know because I checked. The only place that her name appears is in the IBF's rank standings at number 3. So she's very close to becoming number 1. But if she has to go through Micaiah Krebs to do it, it's not going to be easy. I mean, winning a title at this weight is difficult enough, and that's if Sky even gets the opportunity to fight Ellie. I don't know that she will. Say that she doesn't. Say that she ends up picking up a vacant title instead after Ellie leaves this division. It doesn't really get easier after that either, because then all those girls in those ranks would come after Sky, and many of them are actually very good. some very talented, others quite experienced, to where the super bantamweight division is not for the faint of heart. She's going to do the business this weekend. I anticipate Sky is going to win, maybe by way of knockout. She's been showing more mean streak in her fights, fight by fight. But after that, things are going to get a lot more serious for the former champion, and I hope that she's ready.
Callum Smith's up for the David Morrell fight. Obviously, he'd prefer it to be for a world title rather than his interim, but it's a great fight. We're negotiating that fight now with PBC and His Excellency, and hope to wrap up the Callum Smith, David Morrell, and a final confirmation of Subriel Matias against Dalton Smith very soon.
That video excerpt is from a few weeks ago. Here and now, the Callum Smith versus David Morrell fight has not yet been finalized. It has not yet been announced. Maybe it will be by the time that this video is uploaded. I very much like that fight for what is WBO interim status, Callum's interim title that he won from Joshua Buatsi.
What do you think is taking so long?
Not sure, and I don't want to assign blame because I don't know what the holdup is, but my perspective on the fight is David Morrell needs this fight a lot more than Callum. Callum's already interim champion. He's already in a position to go on to a big fight.
Or perhaps be elevated to full champion.
For a fighter of Cuban descent like David Morrell, there is an invisible cap on how far you can go in the United States. I mean, think about it. How many big marquee attractions, how many Cuban fighters went on to become big pay-per-view draws in the United States? So you've seen quite a few Cuban fighters come through. Guillermo Rigondeaux, Erislandy Lara, Uniel Dorticos.
David Morrell.
But how many of them went on to become big marquee attractions? For a fighter like David Morrell, your best bet at getting a big purse, big money, is on the international stage, not the domestic one in the United States. David needs this fight more than Callum does, so I hope that he's not the holdup. Interesting particulars in association with this fight. Rumor has it David Morrell has parted ways with Ronnie Shields, who's been training him for a while now, since the early days of his pro boxing career, and he is now with Abel Sanchez. We already saw in action this past weekend in Philippe Pergovic's corner for his points decision win over David Adilier, and Philippe Pergovic, like David Morrell, was once trained by Ronnie Shields. He went to Abel Sanchez. Now we're hearing that David Morrell has gone to Abel Sanchez. I suppose that slightly improves David's chances of victory. I don't have a high opinion of Ronnie Shields.
Ronnie Shields' fighters, I've often seen some lackluster performances from fighters trained by Ronnie, and it is consistent.
Abel Sanchez, in my opinion, is a step up from a Ronnie Shields. But does that secure the victory for David? Is that all it's going to take? I don't trust Cuban fighters in high-level situations. I'm going to be honest.
I don't care how that sounds. I don't trust that David Morrell can get the job done. When you compare how Callum's been looking at light heavyweight and how David has been looking,
Callum has been looking better. There was all this hullabaloo about David Morrell in the super middleweight division when he was down there, and he hadn't even fought anybody good, anybody relevant, but there was all this hype about him
around him.
Since moving up, that hype is dissipated because he didn't look good with Radovanje Kalajdzic.
He lost to David Benavidez.
And a lot of people think he should have lost to Imam Katayev in his last fight. I picked David Morrell to win that fight with the understanding that it might be close and it might be controversial.
And it was.
The prediction stuck, and now I'm telling you that I don't trust that he can beat Callum Smith. Compared to Callum, Callum's been looking good, fight by fight. As a light heavyweight, Artur Beterbiev loss aside,
his power carried.
Where David Morrell seemed a lot stronger as a super middleweight than he does now as a light heavyweight, he doesn't land with the same authority.
This looks like he doesn't punch as hard at 175, where
Callum's more experienced as a fighter too. Don't forget that Callum used to be a champion at 168. He's been in there with George Groves, with John Ryder, with Canelo, with Artur Beterbiev, with Joshua Buatsi. More recently, he's won some fights, he's lost some fights, but he's competed at a higher level longer than David Morrell.
Slight edge to the interim champion. I give Callum Smith a slight edge in this fight. David Morrell, I just don't trust his instincts.
I didn't like how he looked with Kalajdzic, didn't like how he looked with Katayev. Katayev dropped him on his ass, too. He knocked him down for the first time in his career, and Katayev is not a big guy. He's not a big light heavyweight, so imagine if Callum Smith lands on him. Imagine if Callum lands a bomb on David Morrell.
Callum's a big guy. He's got big reach. Maybe harder to get away from him. David Morrell is a mid-range to outside fighter.
That means he could end up giving Callum Smith the room and real estate he needs to get full extension on the arm and generate devastating power like what we saw in the Castillo fight a couple of years ago. Callum hit that guy so hard he caused him to have a seizure.
David being a mid-range to outside fighter and not being particularly prolific with his output, he could end up giving Callum the window to get off a bomb.
So I am leaning towards Callum to win this one. I believe that this is supposed to land on either the undercard of Canelo versus Crawford or the 2-3-day festival leading up to it. Don't forget, that Thursday, that Friday, and that Saturday, Turkey is putting on fights.
Let's hope they get this fight done in a jiffy. In men's heavyweight news, more on the ongoing situation between Alexander Usyk and his mandatory challenger via the WBO, Joseph Parker. The word from Team Usyk is he's earned the right to choose his own future per the director of Team Usyk and RTF, Sergey Lapine.
Lapine explained that the pause is related to injuries and the need for recovery. Usyk just fought not but a few weeks ago against Daniel for the second time, and based on what wear and tear he may have amassed in training or the fight, he needs a little bit of time off, to where being ordered to go straight into negotiations with Joseph Parker.
They have to come right back.
So Usyk's age may not yet be showing up in his performances because it looks like he hasn't lost a step. He beat Daniel in even more dominant fashion than the first time out. So his age isn't showing up in his performances, but what happens afterwards? He needs to rest. He needs to recover on his own time and not the WBO's. And you know what that could mean, that if he doesn't comply with this order, they could strip him.
They have filed for a medical exemption to the mandatory, which we talked about in passing in my previous video, based on the nature of Usyk's injuries and his overall prognosis. That will tell the story.
You know what I want? I want to see him retire. Very few fighters in the sport of boxing get to go out on high, get to go out unbeaten as champions. Usyk has that rare opportunity, that chance, and I don't think there's anything left to prove anymore.
Of course, he could stick around a while longer, a year, 2 years, making defenses of his title, but how long will it be before it catches up to him? He's 37 or 38 or whatever it is, dangerously close to 40. Why poke the bear? Why roll the dice?
He's made plenty of money throughout his career, winning the World Boxing Super Series and his fights with Tony Bellew, Derek Chisora, Anthony Joshua, the 2 Tyson Fury fights, the 2 Daniel Dubois fights, to where he should be set for life.
You made money. You made history. You've been a 3-time undisputed champion across 2 weight classes. Take a load off. If you want to stay in the world of boxing, train fighters. Open up a gym.
But enough is enough. At some point, you've done enough. Elsewhere in the heavyweight division, Daniel Dubois has split from Don Charles following his defeat to Alexander Usyk in July. Daniel has parted ways with his trainer and opted to team up with Tony Sims, who trains the likes of Conor Benn.
I'm a little bit ambivalent about this decision because I happen to think Daniel and Don made a great pair. You could see almost immediately the difference that Don was making on Daniel's demeanor and his confidence. That run of fights that he was winning, Jarrell Miller, Felipe Prgovic, Anthony Joshua, that was all with Don. To so easily cast all of that aside because you lost to Usyk, who beat you already.
Not just you, but everybody else. Does losing to Usyk really warrant a corner switch? So Daniel has already been with Shane McGuigan, and he's already been with Don Charles. Now they're saying he's going to go with Tony Sims.
A decision I've no doubt Daniel's father made.
They say he's the one in control of Daniel's career. He makes the big decisions. I believe it was his decision for Daniel to leave Shane McGuigan for Don Charles, and I think the relationship with Don Charles was a fruitful relationship for the most part. That Don Charles's version of Daniel Dubois is not an easy out for anyone. Yes, Usyk beat him, but that doesn't mean the rest of the division can do that.
Daniel is only 27 years old. Plenty of good years left to give to the sport of boxing. I said it the day after the fight in my weekend recap that at 27, he can come again. A loss to Joe Joyce, 2 losses to Alexander Usyk, but that's hardly the end of the world. If anything, that's a sign of a vibrant, thriving heavyweight division where they're not protecting their O's. They're fighting.
And don't forget where most of the money is in the heavyweight division. It's in the UK. It's in Britain. Whether it's a fight with Fabio Wortley or a Fraser Clark, Moses Italma down the line. My recommendation, what is a fight that makes sense for Daniel to come back with? A Joe Joyce fight. Many years has it been since Joe Joyce battered Daniel Dubois with little more than just a jab, a persistent jab, to where if they fought now, I would go with Daniel to win. I would go with Daniel to stop today's Joe Joyce, and that might be good for his psyche, his headspace, to at least avenge that loss. You weren't able to avenge the loss to Usyk, but you can get your lick back with that one.
Lick it.
Just an idea, just a passing thought. Daniel doesn't have to retire. He doesn't have to call it a career at 27 with 3 losses.
2 of which came to the same guy, one of the best fighters, if not the best fighter, of this generation.
I can think of several fights that are still out there for young Zaniel. But as far as him leaving Don Charles for Tony Sims, I'm ambivalent. Because when you go about it this way, after a loss, it's almost like you're blaming Don for the loss.
Otherwise, why would you leave him? What is it you think Tony Sims can give you that Don can't? You're starting over. You've hit the reset button. You don't have the rapport with Tony Sims that you've already got with Don.
I feel like he had a good thing going with Don, and I feel like Don understood him. I feel like it wasn't just business between Daniel and Don. Don had a rooting interest in that fighter. It's not just whipping him into shape.
Collecting a check for doing so. I believe that Don wanted what was best for Daniel. If you come up short with Usyk, there's no shame in that. Everybody's come up short with Usyk.
So now he's working with veteran trainer Tony Sims, who's been around a long time, trained a lot of fighters. He's worked with the likes of Kevin Mitchell, IBF champion Darren Barker.
It's the 1-on-1s and 2s on DAZN.
Ted Cheeseman, back when Ted was fighting Anthony Joshua early on in his career. More recently, Connor Ben. I'm told that Johnny Fisher has also enlisted the aid of Tony Sims, and now Daniel Dubois has done the same. So this is a guy with experience. I don't know if it's my imagination, but a lot of Tony's fighters, they do seem to exhibit a lot of spite, a lot of mean streak, a lot of gusto. So maybe this could be a good fit for Daniel Dubois, but I would have liked it a lot more if he just stayed with Don and continued to build with Don, because Don's version of this fighter, Don's version of Daniel, is the most formidable version of him I've ever seen.